Welcome into 5 Wide Fantasy. Today's video, we're looking at the worst fantasy football playoff schedules for wide receivers this season. If you guys haven't checked out our video looking at the best schedules for wide receivers, make sure you go look at the previous video and go check that out. There are some teams here that have very tough schedules with very good wide receivers. So it'll definitely take some discussion. Again, I'm here to give you guys the information, the knowledge, things you need to know to be able to make your decisions. Ultimately, it's up to you what you want to do with these players. But there are some guys that you could make some serious decisions on that could help make or break your season. And as well, honestly, it's all about getting to the playoffs. For a lot of you, you might be in a league with, let's say, 10 teams, and there's 6 teams going to the playoffs. That's 60% of the league. All you got to do is get there. Whatever anybody does in the weeks prior does not matter. We're looking for the best possible matchups for those final 3 weeks of the fantasy season. So if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to let me know. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. Like the video. Comment down below if you hate some of these players to sell or some players that you're looking to trade for or trade away to potentially trade some of these guys or trade for some of these players we talked about in the previous video. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get to these players, starting with the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars have a very tough schedule heading into the fantasy playoffs. One to monitor for Mr. Christian Kirk. The Cowboys, 15th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. The Jets, 8th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, and the Texans, 5th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. Now, for some of you, it might be hard to believe that the Houston Texans are very good against opposing wide receivers. And I was looking at these 3 teams in particular, and I think it comes down to one thing, being that number 1 corner spot. That is Trevon Diggs, Ahmad Sauce Gardner, and Derek Stingley Jr. Those are 3, in my mind, elite cornerbacks, and they can defend the outside very well. So I wanted to go a little bit deeper here, look at the slot in particular. Houston, 8th in fantasy points allowed to the slot. The Jets, 17th in fantasy points allowed to the slot. And the Cowboys, 28th in fantasy points allowed to the slot. So what should we do with Christian Kirk? Is he someone that we should trade? Again, another way to look at this as well as we get deeper into these 3 matchups. The Cowboys and Texans are both 28th and 32nd, respectively, in run defense grade, with Travis Etienne having just a monster start here since James Robinson's departure. This could be a case of the Jags leading more on the run game against those 2 teams. The Jets are a very good run defense, but overall, I mean, not just from Sauce Gardner, this entire pass defense is very good. 7th in pass DVOA, 2nd in coverage grade. So I think these still are truly tough matchups. And Christian Kirk is a player that is reliable upon volume, 14th in targets on the season, and he's also been able to score. All 5 of his touchdowns have been on his 10 red zone targets. So he hasn't been able to, break a big play for a touchdown, make plays that result in touchdowns outside of the opponent 20. I'm definitely, like, Christian Kirk, I love you. You're one of my number 1 players to target before the season, but now might be the time to let go. Because I do think regardless of whether or not it's the slot guy or one of these premier outside guys guarding him, I do think these are tough matchups. And Trevor Lawrence in a tough matchup, like against a difficult opponent or difficult passing opponent, has struggled this year. I'm not sure I can trust Trevor Lawrence in the fantasy playoffs to be able to do enough for Christian Kirk to be a player that I want to start. So if you guys are sitting in a good spot and Christian Kirk potentially is helping you sit in that good spot, he might be someone worth trading away to get someone with a better schedule in the playoffs. All right. The next 4 teams are tough to swallow, but this is for real. The Chiefs, the Kansas City Chiefs, have a tough playoff schedule. All of them, their opponents, top 5 in fantasy points allowed to the position. Houston 5th, Seattle 3rd, and Denver 1st. Do I want to play a Kansas City wide receiver against the Denver Broncos in the fantasy championship? Fuck no. No chance I'm doing that. And there's just a logjam at the position as well in Kansas City. We're looking at Juju, MVS, Justin Watson has had some work, McCole Hardman, Sky Moore. All 4 of those guys, or all 5 of those guys, had 20-plus routes run last week against the Titans. And then I'm not even including Kadarius Toney, who in limited snaps and limited, I think he ran 6 or maybe 9 routes, and he had a couple targets and a couple receptions. What's his role going to be like? I don't think I want to play any of these guys in my championship. I think they're going to be tough guys to play throughout the fantasy playoffs. And we can't forget about Travis Kelce, who's a target hog. He has a 24.8% target share on the season. And in the red zone, almost 30%. It's a player that's going to steal the touchdowns that we need to win our matchups in fantasy in the last 3 weeks. So I would I would not look to be having any of these guys. I think Juju is an excellent sell high player right now, and it's really going to be a guessing game come the playoffs as to which one of these players you want to start if you can. So look to trade any of your Chiefs wide receivers, I would definitely say. Next up is the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings, another team with a tough matchup. The Indianapolis Colts, who are second in fantasy points allowed, the Giants fourth, and the Green Bay Packers seventh. So Tyler, should I really trade Justin Jefferson away, maybe my fourth overall pick in my fantasy draft, who's fifth in targets, fourth in receptions, the wide receiver 6 on the season? Honestly, we saw Justin Jefferson have a big week against Green Bay in week 1. But I do think the Colts and Giants are teams that just really muck things up, play at a slow pace, and don't give us a lot of plays. And Jefferson has, had games where he hasn't been, that consistent boom and consistent 15-point guy. So if there's a, Stephon Diggs, I know as a player, if I'm looking at my schedule here, it goes Miami, Chicago, Cincinnati. If Josh Allen's close enough to 100%, he's a player like he could flip Justin Jefferson for Stephon Diggs. Adam Thielen, that's a player maybe to take note of for anyone that has him. Completely unplayable. Would not start him in any of these matchups. And for the Giants and Packers in particular, they blitz at some of the highest rates in the NFL. I think the Packers are actually number 1, and Kirk Cousins has struggled against the blitz this season. So that could be something to, lean on in your decision making. Is Justin Jefferson a must-sell guy for me? No, you can definitely hang on to him. I think it's a tough pill to swallow if it doesn't work out. But again, I'm just giving you the information here that this is a tough stretch for him in the fantasy playoffs. Next up, the Los Angeles Rams. Cooper Kupp and the Los Angeles Rams have a very, very tough start to the schedule for the fantasy playoffs. The Rams go against the Packers, who are fourth in fantasy points, the Broncos, who are first, and then finish things off with the Chargers, who are 16th, middle of the pack. Cooper Kupp is absolutely not a player that I'm looking to sell. Cooper Kupp is a player that has proven time and time again this season that he is matchup proof and can put together elite performances against elite defenses. I was going back through the schedule, looking at his matchups, thinking they played some really good teams. Buffalo, San Francisco, Dallas, San Francisco, Tampa Bay. Those 5 games, all of them top 10. Some of them he was maybe even number 1 or number 3 receiver on the week, top 3 even on a lot of those. So he's averaging 11.5 targets per game, 9 receptions per game. The matchups don't matter. Cooper Kupp is going to be Cooper Kupp. They're forcing him the ball. All I'm here to tell you is Van Jefferson and Allen Robinson are not going to have second half breakouts. There's no Odell Beckham type of end of season breakout coming for either one of those players. So if you have them, drop them. They won't mean anything to your team. You don't need them. There's nothing that's going to change on that front, especially when it matters most. This offense, Cooper Kupp is what makes his offense tick, and that's not going to change in these tough matchups. I know that they're going to be intimidating, especially the Broncos, but someone I'm not in any way looking to sit, or trade in those matchups. Last one up. Here's where I'll try to settle myself into a real take here. The Dolphins. Miami Dolphins have another tough schedule. They go Buffalo, Green Bay, and New England. Buffalo just outside the top 10 in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, but I think nevertheless a tough matchup. And what's important to keep in mind here is that Buffalo and New England are road games. This is late in December we're talking. I'm pretty sure New England's on New Year's Day. So these are matchups that are going to could be in some bad weather potentially as well. And how does this Miami team, playing in beautiful Florida for all their home games, how do they adjust in this high volume passing offense in difficult weather? I think it could be a problem. So I actually am going to tell you that even though, Tyreek Hill, who's leading the NFL in targets, receptions, and yards, I don't think Tyreek's someone that I'm looking to sell, but I think Jalen Waddle might actually make sense. Waddle's target share kind of indicates more of like a wide receiver 2 in terms of the volume of targets and the share of targets he has in the offense. But what he's done best this year is he's 4th in yards after the catch per reception. He's been able to pick up yards after the catch, and then he's 6th in touchdowns. So he scored quite a bit, and Tyreek Hill hasn't scored very much. He has 3 TDs on the season. So I do think that Waddle's in a spot where he is the wide receiver 2 in this offense. It's really a 1A, 1B situation, but I do think he is the B. So I do think if you can use, Jalen Waddle to acquire a package of a couple of the guys we talked about on the receivers that have great playoff schedules, I won't mention them because I do want you to watch that video. There are a couple guys that I think you could package. You could trade Waddle to get a package of 2 of these guys that have really good playoff schedules. or a player like a Stephon Diggs, who I mentioned has a really good finish to the season as well. I think Debo does too. So it's something to keep in mind. Potentially you could do it, but this is a Dolphins offense that kind of lives and breathes through these two. So, but Waddle would be the player that I would actually look to potentially trade and maybe get one of these elite wide receivers for him, because he's been phenomenal. He's coming off another solid week. So look to do that if you can. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, like, subscribe to the channel, comment down below. And of course, go check out our partners over at Betfred. Bet 50, get 250 this week and every week in the NFL. All you have to do, sign up at the link down below and then deposit $50, bet it on anything, football, hockey, basketball, college football, whatever it might be, and they're going to give you $250 in free bets. Again, link is down below in the description. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.